This afternoon, we have a fantastic set of talks that deal with ideas that are even more new and intriguing in terms of peer review. We've been talking mostly about relatively concrete concepts of making peer review open, recognizing peer review. In the next hour, we'll hear from a group of speakers who have explored different ways of going about peer review altogether. So without further ado, I will hand the podium to Prachi Vasti.
I'm going to try and get this to work. Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Prachi Vasti. So thank you so much to organizers for giving me the opportunity to share this with you today. So while we're all here sort of trying to nudge the boulder that is our current peer review system, I wanted to share something that I think would be a great way for all of us, for students and postdocs and mentors here and all of you watching at home, to actually make a difference today in increasing the participation and the training for early career researchers in peer review, and also to increase feedback on the under-reviewed literature. And that is through a preprint journal club, and that is essentially what it sounds like. So it's generally a critical analysis of preprints with feedback that's sent to the authors directly. And so, we all are aware of a couple of different problems. One is that most of us were not really trained to do peer review. Most of it has been from our own personal experience. This is from a poll done by eLife, in which mostly we learn how to peer review from the way our own work has been reviewed, and also perhaps through our supervisors. But we generally learn sort of on the job rather than through any formal way, any best practices. And then there's also the issue that we've had this great sort of revolution and increased amount of preprint posting, but the feedback is still a little bit less, I think, than we would like. And so a preprint journal club sort of attacks both of these different things. And so there's a lot of different benefits. First of all, students would learn how to do critical evaluation of work that's not already peer reviewed. So you don't have to really rest on somebody else's opinion. There's a lot of material to go over. Students also learn how to produce a written review, sort of go through the whole process of summarizing and major points and minor points and the sort of things that we're all used to doing. And importantly, there's this issue of accountability. So all of us know that have participated in journal clubs that it's really easy to sort of rip apart a paper in a way that's not constructive. I highly recommend this opinion written by David Drubin that I send to all the students when we get ready to do a journal club of any kind, so that they are aware of how to sort of turn their comments into something constructive. And so having sort of students send materials to the authors, knowing that people are actually going to read their collected comments, that's going to make a big difference in sort of what they decide to say about it. And then also this is great, a preprint journal club would increase the amount of interactions that the students have with the larger scientific community. And I think the earlier that happens, the better. And then, of course, the authors would get much needed feedback. And then generally, with this energy and the large number of students that are participating in journal clubs at every institution that exists, we can sort of increase the participation in peer review instead of having a very small percentage of the population doing a large percentage of the review, right? And so I wanted to give you an idea of a proof of concept. So this is a course that I ran at my institution. So we had graduate students that are in my department, second to fifth year graduate students a couple of years ago in the fall. So essentially the way that we ran this journal club was the very first day I would give a little bit of instruction, sort of what are preprints, what are some best practices on review. And then every single week a student would give a presentation on a preprint of their choice. On a topic they were interested in. They would have a lively discussion in class, and then the presenting author and then one of the other students who was going to present the next week would prepare a written response. They would take a few days to do that, and then at some point I would step in and give the students a little bit of feedback on their reviews, so sort of discuss tone and constructive comments. And then the students would send the review to the authors directly, and I'm happy to say that all of the authors would send point-by-point responses back to the students, which is really, really great. So they would get good feedback directly on their reviews and hear a lot of positive information about how those those reviews were received. So I won't talk much more about that right now, but if you want to do something like this at your institution, I strongly encourage you to go to this website where Jessica has put up a really great video of me evangelizing about this. So if you need to sell the idea to somebody, it's like packaged into a nice, neat, couple minutes. So the other thing that we did was we also posted them online so that other students could learn how to do this, and just in the interest of transparency and seeing that this could work. And even many people read those a couple hundred times. So it's not that it seemed like there was some interest in this project. And now there's a really great site that has been started by Daniela Sideri and Sam Hindle, who's here in the audience somewhere. So they have really taken the torch over on this and generate a very beautiful site in which they have some resources for preprint journal clubs, and they offer a platform in order to sort of post this publicly to have a more public discussion. Okay, so what did we learn from the course that I actually ran? So the students really love this format. So they actually have to take this course on analyzing papers every single semester. And it's up to the faculty member who runs the course that semester to decide on a theme. So they could have decided on, science in the news or controversial literature or something like that, and I had chosen preprints. So rather than just having this discussion and sort of screaming into the void, they really much preferred learning how to write formally a written review and having some accountability by sending it back to the authors. The authors were overwhelmingly positive. They were thrilled that somebody read their preprint. So that was fantastic. And then the students, like I said, received point-by-point responses, and this is really critical feedback. The things that I would say that we learned that I might change if we were to do this again. So I do think so. I gave a very, very short primer at the beginning of the session on sort of training the students on how to go about doing a peer review. I think that was still a little bit minimal compared to what was needed. So there was quite a bit of sort of redirecting during the course. And I think that was part of the training as well. But I think that, this is something that I'd like to talk about in a non-conference session tomorrow for anybody who's interested, is what more we can do with the existing resources on peer review training. And then one thing is that in this setting, because the students were from a variety of different labs, from a variety of different disciplines, the only thing that connected them is that they were in our department. So when you can imagine if you're doing a journal club from people in a wide variety of backgrounds, you don't have like a large number of content experts who are really able to sort of dig into the data. So that was just a little bit that could be really solved by doing this on a more narrowly focused course that's topic specific or within a lab or something like that. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of other examples. I put out a call to see if since then anybody else has tried to do this. And we had, it's a small number obviously, but I'm glad that other institutions are starting to do this. Other people are running preprint journal clubs at their universities. So we had 6 respondents. So 6 people who ran preprint journal clubs at their school. So half of them sent feedback to the authors. I just wanted to highlight one, which is Josh Bremenek at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He ran a journal club course in which when the students sent out the reviews, they received back not just point-by-point responses, but they also sent back because they had submitted it to a journal. So they submitted back the journal reviews, the response to reviewers, and then the final version. So the students learned an enormous amount just from all of this information, and they could really compare their reviews to the journal reviews, and there was a lot to be gained there, which I think was great. And then some of the suggestions that the people who also ran the journal clubs mentioned. So we discussed a little bit earlier yesterday about using Hypothesis as a platform for aggregating comments, and if anyone wants to, eLife has a nice implementation of this that you can go look at now. And then some of them didn't do it in a class setting and thought that if you sort of mandated participation and sort of forced them to give feedback and things like that, that would help the way that we did. And then some of them, as I said, only about half of them sent comments to the authors. So they really wanted to do that in the next go around. And then as far as, what would they like to have available to them to sort of run this type of system again. Some of them wanted a way to sort of flag preprints that, oh, I'm looking for a review, or I want someone to do this for their journal club. So that I think makes a little bit of sense if there was some way to sort of say that you really want particular extra attention onto your work. And then also some people wanted a standardized platform, which I think we now have through pre-review and some other things. But the thing to highlight is that, for all of those people who have done preprint journal clubs run for their students at their institutions, all of them unanimously felt that they would do this again and that it was a good experience. And so, so what can you do now? So, of course, any one of you could start one of these journal clubs. You could do it for a course in your that you're teaching, in your own lab meeting or a joint lab meeting, in a scientific interest group that's very specific by topic. And the other thing I was thinking about was how could we expand this going forward to a much larger group? And I got this idea from Alice Sarani, who's at UCLA, and she has started to run a phase separation journal club. So she's just interested in this topic of phase separation. And so she's done this using an online platform called Slack. And it's just a sort of chat platform where you can sort of discuss back and forth. But she's now opened it up to anyone who's interested, across the country, across the world. And then you could theoretically collect all the comments in a Google Doc and send it to the authors. But I just wanted to show you a screenshot that she's allowed me to use with permission here, just sort of what this would look like. So, they would set a time that on this day at this time, we're going to do this specific paper. And then you could give a little bit, the person who's presenting would give a little bit of background, and then talk about, sort of what the methods are, what the findings are, and start going at the figures, and then they would start a discussion. And so this sort of allows you, the thing I really like about this is that you can collect a very large number of people who have a very, very specific interest, so there could be a very lively discussion that sort of transcends geographic boundaries. So that's really all I have to say. So I think the main points here is that we can really leverage these journal clubs that are happening at every single institution everywhere. So we can do this to train students on written peer review, also increase the number of participants in peer review, and also increase the amount of feedback on preprints. And then you may want to consider a virtual journal club, which anyone can start anytime, starting now. Thank you.
Speaker unfortunately could not make it to the meeting on account of being sick with the flu, but he has very intrepidly recorded his talk and sent it to us, which we are happy to play for you now. His name is Andrew McCallum. He's done a great experiment, or actually it's more than an experiment, it's 5 years of running a site for open peer review in computer science.
Me from joining you in person. I've been looking forward to connecting with your community for some time, and I hope I get another chance soon. So I'm Andrew McCallum. I'm a professor of computer science at UMass Amherst, where I do research in machine learning and natural language processing. And I've been interested in some time in applying my research to the scientific literature. So that started all the way back in the mid-90s, about a decade before Google Scholar existed, when colleagues and I built a system with some very similar functionality. Later, when I arrived at UMass in about 2002, I built a more modern system that knows not only about research papers, but also about topical trends in research, as well as their interconnections, and people, as well as institutions, conferences, journals, grants, etc. Currently, I'm working on building a knowledge base of all scientists in the world by using automated integration and extraction methods from many different sources, as well as building knowledge bases of scientific entities and their relations extracted from the body of scientific articles. So we'd like to accelerate the progress of science, and increasingly, especially over the past 5 years, have come to the conclusion that to do that, we also need to revolutionize peer review. A lot of this was crystallized for me when I had some great discussions with my longtime friend Jan LeCun, who's currently director of AI research at Facebook, who was proposing some pretty radical ideas about how we should separate publishing from reviewing. And so we began to discuss this quite a bit, as well as his desire to create a new venue for neural network research that would be an instantiation of this view. At about that same time, we started looking at open peer review broadly, and I don't know how many of you have seen this paper from 2012 in which the computational neuroscience community asked authors to contribute their own notion of how open peer review should work, rating features from strongly discouraged to encouraged. And the thing that I most take away from this is the diversity of thought about how open peer review should work. So my conclusion is that what we really need is experimentation and flexibility in the way that we explore this space. What are the dimensions of this landscape? Well, there's who has access to what information when. So who are researchers and editors and reviewers, subscribers, and the general public? What are, of course, things like the submitted manuscripts or the accepted manuscripts or the peer reviews themselves or volunteer comments from the general public, author responses, as well as the attribution of who created each one of these things. And the when, of course, corresponds to the different phases of the peer review process. So when we plot these dimensions for multiple different venues that consider themselves more classic closed peer review, we see some differences but a fair amount of uniformity. When we look at these plots for different venues that call themselves open review, it's remarkable again to see the differences between them. So let me tell you about this ICLR venue, which was created by Jan LeCun, and how it works. So in the reviewing process here, papers upon submission are immediately posted to the Cornell archive, so they're public. Editors then carefully pick 3 expert reviewers assigned to each paper. These reviewers can review anonymously or non-anonymously, their choice. The general public can also contribute reviews during the review process, but these must be non-anonymous. All these reviews appear publicly as soon as they're entered into the system. They don't wait until the end of the review process. And furthermore, authors, program chairs, reviewers can all message each other, either publicly or privately, throughout the review process. Then at the end, as editors make acceptance decisions, and all papers and all reviews remain online in perpetuity. There were some people who were afraid, of the various bad outcomes from this, like there would be flame wars due to the public nature of it, or the opposite. Also, other people were afraid that people would be too soft in the reviews, given how public they were. But in practice, neither one of these concerns really became a problem. And furthermore, some magical things happened. So here's an example of a paper that had a number of theorems. Paul Shearer, a math professor at Ohio State, was unknown to this community, but nonetheless an expert in the particular topic of this paper. And he wrote a beautiful review explaining that, well, in theorem number 3, there seems to be a problem with the nature of the proof, and here are some ideas about how possibly to fix it. And the authors respond, oh, thank you so much for pointing this out. You're absolutely right. And here are our thoughts about how we're going to go ahead and fix it. So that just never would have happened if the review process had been closed. So after 5 years of experience with various different open review workflows in the computer science community, here are just a few bullets. One is that we found that we really get more vigorous reviewing when the review process is open during the review period itself. We've actually been working with sociologists to design surveys, to interact with our community to understand what they feel are the impacts of the changes that we're experimenting with. Second, we found that even stodgy communities are willing to try some small steps of change. The UAI conference is a long-time-old publishing venue in artificial intelligence, and they've been willing to not allow the whole general public to see the papers during the review period, but to see the non-assigned reviewers are allowed to see the papers and make volunteer comments on them. Thirdly, there's a long tradition in computer science of double-blind review, and people have been eager to keep that. This was not a facet of the earlier instances of the ICLR conference, but this year, for the first time, ICLR worked in a surprising way that I'm very happy the community was willing to do. That is, submitted papers are made public without the author's names attributed. And this is the case throughout the reviewing period. And then at the end of the reviewing period, all papers, whether they're accepted or not, have the authors revealed. And so this is just one case of what I consider a pretty radical kind of experiment that we were able to support, that the community was willing to try. Fourthly, we find that anonymous reviews can, by the open public, the non-invited ones can sometimes lead to some trolling, and so we recommend that non-assigned reviewers should not be allowed to be anonymous. And lastly, we've just seen tremendous growing interest within the computer science community in new experimentations in open peer review, including from some mainline flagship conferences in the field, like the ones listed. All right, so the Open Review system allows users to create profiles that help us capture conflict of interest information. There's a very rich system whereby program chairs can design the form through which papers are submitted with various different kinds of information. Each venue has its own homepage and its own reviewing policies and workflow. Here's an example of an individual paper, and here you get a sense of the extensiveness of the discussion, of the scientific discussion, and the back and forth nature of it for this one paper. This includes reviews from the officially assigned reviewers, as well as from the volunteer public who are writing things, as well as responses from authors, and there's a tremendous amount of useful scientific content here. So behind all of this is the Open Review software platform. Its main facet is that it's highly configurable. There's a small set of Lego blocks that are rearrangeable to support wide experimentation, going all the way from completely traditional closed review to wide open review. And there's a scriptable API that allows a lot of flexibility in defining this workflow. The system is also scalable using modern parallel distributed backend database technology. As one indication of the scalability, soon we're going to be mirroring the entirety of the Cornell archive as well as other sources. And it's also open, including having an open API that allows others to build their own web front end on top of our database backend. So lastly, I just want to say what I'm now very much looking forward to getting to, and this was part of the plan from the beginning, is leveraging my own machine learning research to try to improve the peer review process. And this includes current work that we're doing on building a database of researchers and their expertise and their conflicts of interest, all auto-populated and maintained, including the ability to do probabilistic reasoning about human edits to the system. We're also working on expertise matching of papers to reviewers using deep neural networks to build detailed topic models and interpretable, editable expertise models, and using submodular optimization for many-to-many reviewer-to-paper matching at large scale for large conferences, which is really neat. In computer science, it can be common to have 5,000 papers submitted to a conference, and we need to assign roughly 6,000 reviewers to those papers, and in order to stay on schedule, we need to do all of that in just less than a week's time. And so using automated systems to help editors do this well is a key part of how computer science works. And then lastly, what I'm most interested in getting to in the end is building incentive systems for review quality, using research and mechanism design to encourage high quality unbiased reviews, and using network analysis to do large-scale analysis of sub-communities, the sentiment between them, in order to try to uncover bias. All right, and so with that, I'll close. Thank you very much. I would be so happy to hear from any of you anytime. I hope we get to meet in person. Thanks very much.
Okay, hi, I'm Mike Eisen, for those of you who don't know me. I'm from UC Berkeley, HHMI, and PLOS. All right, we'll start with this. I hope you can see the reflection in the glasses. This took a little bit of work. I want to talk about a new project I'm launching to try to actually implement a lot of the ideas that have been kicking around here. I'll start off by saying I know I have a reputation for wanting to burn things down, but I want to start by saying the premise here is that, for me, is that I think one of the most important and valuable things that scientists do is peer review each other's work. And everything I am talking about and trying to do is in the spirit of trying to make peer review work better and be more effective for the scientific community in myriad ways, not to try to destroy peer review. So, but the other sort of basic hypothesis I have here is that the current system we use for doing peer review with journals is, I think for reasons Aaron laid out very nicely and others have talked about, just not the right way to approach the problem. Okay, so ideas for changing the way we do publishing and peer review in biology have been around for a long time. Probably people in this room who weren't even born when Harold Varmus put forward this proposal in the late 90s called eBiomed, which had a lot of features that we're talking about here today. I think people should go back and read it. It's an interesting historical document as well as an interesting proposal, and there's a long conversation to be had about why nothing ever came of this at the time. But I think one of the lessons for me, and I think something that I feel like we've done poorly over the years, is we've spent a lot of time talking about why these ideas are important and spent almost no time trying to implement them. So, for 20 years, I think we've been arguing for why I think we should do peer review in a different way, and yet there have been relatively few experiments that have tried to sort of fully implement the idea that we can do peer review after papers are published and to take that process seriously. So what I'm going to talk about today is sort of a new initiative I'm launching, which I call Appraise. Appraise was an effort to try to find a word that both mentioned peer review and had PPR for post-publication review in it. It has a backronym, but don't worry about that. The key idea here is experiment. So this is, I won't say it's a half-baked idea, but it's not a fully implemented idea. And in echoing something Andrew just said in his talk before, the important thing for us to do now is to experiment with new ways to do peer review that try to implement many of these ideas and to see what works. I think we can all say this is the right way to do things, but none of us know what's going to work at all, both in an implementational sense and in a cultural sense. I'm told everything has to have a mission statement, so slightly a mission statement. But basically, we want to accelerate research. That's the whole idea here. We want to make research work better. And I think importantly, we want to promote the use of research, not just speed it up, by building a robust, and what I want to do is build a reader and community-driven rather than author-driven or journal-driven system of post-publication peer review. And I want to try to explain what I'm thinking. Again, I want to emphasize there are already efforts to do post-publication peer review out there, and I think too many times here we've sort of pretended that this hasn't already started. Faculty of 1000 Research has done a great job in getting post-publication peer review off the ground. I think we published there. It was great. I loved it. I think it is implementing a lot of the things that we're trying to do in a very effective way. There's one thing missing from Faculty of 1000 Research right now, which is what I've been thinking most about, which is its review focuses on the sort of technical characteristics of the article to try to make the articles accurate and effective, and try to help the authors improve their work. But what sort of holds us back as a field, I think, in trying to make all these things work, is that people rely on peer review for a lot more than just it being, is the work technically accurate and sound. If that's all we cared about, people would just publish the work online and let people comment on it. But of course, we use peer review for a lot more, and we're trying to think about developing ways to address the other uses of peer review as well as the sort of technical aspects. So what are we trying to do? So the basic idea is to create a system, and I should say we started to work with Andrew, who gave the previous talk at OpenReview.net, to try to implement this with their software. That these ideas are all open and citable. This is sort of just basic principles. They're linked to papers on bioRxiv, and we're focusing on papers on bioRxiv at the outset. The sort of key feature here is we're not trying to review every paper. We're not trying to review papers authors asked us to review. This is a reader-driven process. The idea is right now we have a system in which you're asked to review papers, but you spend a lot of time reading papers, and probably you put a considerable amount of thought and effort into thinking about papers you read, but which nobody asked you to review. The idea here is to focus on reviewing papers that you want to read. And in fact, anybody who wants to join up with us, I'm willing to write you a note excusing you from doing any peer review for journals so that you can spend that time doing appraisals for us. Again, we're not just doing technical reviews, but we're focusing on providing information to different audiences of readers, potential readers, and others, and I'll talk about that in a second. And that the reviews we're trying to produce are part full text, directed kind of full text reviews where we're asking different kinds of questions to people to try to solicit information back from them that will be useful for different audiences, but also quantitative reviews that are intended to be used in different ways. Again, it is kind of absurd that everything in the universe you can give your feedback on any product you buy or any food you eat or restaurant you try or hotel you stay at or, toilet you use, I think, but you can't give feedback effectively on scientific papers you read. So we need to solve that problem. Okay, so the key for us is thinking about the different ways that peer review works and who the audiences are. And I think right now we combine all these things down into one catch-all result of peer review, which is a journal title. But that does a job, an amazingly good job in some ways at capturing some of these things, but I think we can do a lot better. So who are the potential audiences? Well, there's readers, right? Potential readers, right? When you're out there, everybody talks about how many papers there are and how we can't find all the papers and how important it is to have some journal title tell us what papers to read. So there is this audience, and I like to think of it as people who are looking for papers to read, right? They want to find articles that are interesting, useful, and important, and we can have reviewers address that question specifically. They read a paper and they say in their review, this is who I think this paper will be interesting to, this is how important it will be to them and why. Second, there's entirely different set of things that people who've already chosen to read an article, that is readers of the article, want. They want to know the technical details of what's right, did they do the right controls? They also want context, what other pieces of information and other papers could you look at, kind of a combined review and news and view in one shape. There's people I like to think of as never readers. They're not ever going to read that paper. They're there just to review the scientist and maybe even the public. They want to know, was the work good? Did the people do a good job? Should I hire this person? And should I trust the work that they've done? And then there's authors who actually care about all of these things for either intrinsic or extrinsic reasons, and they want constructive feedback that makes their papers move better, and I think importantly, that makes their future research better. They don't just want to write a better paper, they want to do better research. And I think, obviously I don't have time to go into details about how we want to do this, but these are the objectives for what we're trying to accomplish in our review. Not just do a technical review, but really focus on doing these other things that are more difficult and for which we don't have any forms. I'll just say some other features we have is that, once someone writes a review, we want to be a little bit like the Supreme Court and allow you to either concur or dissent with previous reviews. So we have a little bit of discussion, but which we also don't have 10,000 people writing the same review of the same paper. We want to try to both recognize where there is consensus and dissent and try to convey that to readers. We're defaulting to identifying appraisers, but the option for certified anonymity I think is really important. Again, I said this before, this sort of full text and partially quantitative. We're working with the openreview.net or starting to work with them to develop software to do this, and we've been talking with bioRxiv and PLOS and others about the idea of developing standards for how to do this, to do the production and display of these pages and tags. And as I've mentioned before, I think we should start calling these polka dots instead of tags in honor of Jessica. And they can all be little colored dots on our papers. I think it would be great. We're going to launch small-scale tests in the next couple months in structural biology, neuroscience, evolutionary genomics, and really focusing on recruiting early career researchers instead of old farts to do this, because I think both they do the best reviews and we really want them to be included in the process. And then our goal is pretty rapidly, once we figure out what we're doing and what works best, to open this up to everybody to form groups and so forth. And I will stop there. If you have any, please give me appraisals of appraise. If you have any feedback, please just email me. And we have a nascent website, but just email me or find me on Twitter. Thank you.
Slide. Well, first I just want to say a word about ASAP Bio. We're kind of a grassroots, scientist-driven organization. We're not affiliated with any university, with any funding agency, with any publishing organization. I think that frees us up to play an important role in really thinking about how to move the publication system forward in the best interest of science and scientists. And I think if we're going to do this, it has to be through cooperation of multiple stakeholders. I think this is the spirit of this meeting, that if we're going to make progress, we have to do it together. And I think that's also an important role of ASAP Bio to kind of catalyze these discussions amongst our community. I think this, we're going to discuss, I'll discuss a proposal called peer feedback, which we're thinking about from the point of view of ASAP Bio trying to catalyze, but it's also going to require many partners. It's also something that we want your feedback on. So anytime over the course of this meeting, we'll also have a discussion group tomorrow on this. But, I think this is the biggest challenge that we face. There's the ideal, which is nice, and there's also the pragmatics of getting there. And somehow identifying where that intersection is the key point to be, because that is what is actually going to lead to a noticeable progress. And I think in terms of the practical, we've heard this over and over again, the issue is not technology. The issue is really understanding the culture and the behavior of the scientific community. Bringing people on board for any new effort is really the critical thing to think about. The other thing to be aware of that we have to acknowledge is many of these problems are very complicated. And unless we can really break them down into identifiable components and kind of tackle them one-on-one, we're, again, not going to make any progress. So I think thinking about all these issues for any new innovation, experiment, initiative is important to do. So, in terms of breaking problems down in components, I think preprints in some ways are a good example in the sense that the journal article really bundled multiple goals together. Traditionally, the journal article was a time in which that work was disseminated to the community and also had finished a process of evaluation. So the goal was both dissemination and evaluation, but as we know, this takes a lot of time before the work is disclosed. So, I think the value proposition of preprints, quite simply, really is to unbundle these two goals and through a preprint server, allow the disclosure of the work so science can advance, other scientists have access to the knowledge, and unbundle the goal of evaluation, which can happen separately. So, one, I think, important thing that's coming out of this meeting is when we say peer review and evaluation, we're really talking about many things together. We're talking about analyzing the technical merit of the work, how to improve the work, but we're also talking about other issues like, is it suitable for that journal? We're also discussed issues like ethical and data checks, and all of this right now is bundled together in one package. So the question is, are we doing the best job by bundling it, or can we think about these issues separately in ways that, again, will maximize the benefit of what we're trying to do in ways that serve science? So the proposal here is thinking about the notion of whether we can unbundle the concept of improving scientific work and analyzing the technical merit of a scientific study, which arguably is what scientists are good at. I mean, that's what one important element of peer review is. And the proposal is maybe that's something that scientists and potentially scientific societies could play a very important role in this component of peer review, and unbundling that from another very important role, which is the role of journals in curating particular bodies of work, and also doing a lot of other very important work for the rigor of data and ethical checks, which traditionally scientists themselves are less willing to do. And whether unbundling this actually, in the end, could create better scientific literature at the end, which is, of course, our major goal. So the notion of peer feedback is really kind of taking a layer of peer review at a journal agnostic level before scientific work goes to a journal. So work comes through a preprint. It would then go through an evaluation process. In this case, I should say, this is author-driven. This is not reader-driven. This is a scientist who's produced a body of work and asked it to be evaluated by members of the scientific community. It's at this stage where I think that scientific societies could potentially play a very big role in providing a reviewer pool that can do this preprint evaluation. So let me unbundle this a little bit, because I think Aaron and Jeremy at the opening talks raised very important questions, and that is, what is the goal? Who is the audience? And I would say at this level, the goal of preprint evaluation is improving the scientific work. Who is the audience? It's the scientist. And in some ways, you know, this is a fancy diagram here, but it's familiar to all of us. This is really a formalization of Prachi's, you know, preprint journal club taken to a more organized level, potentially even with reviewer pools within scientific societies. And it's also what we kind of used to do as a scientific community. We used to regularly send our work to colleagues, you know, for evaluation. It's kind of a habit we've kind of stopped doing in a way, but is maybe something that we should return to. So the spirit of this is not some like crazy innovation. This is something that's kind of inbred in the way we should behave as scientists. But the other element to the problem is scientists ultimately want this work published. That is the reality of the current world we live in today. And so a second audience potentially are the journals. And right now, having reviews of technical merit of quality, not saying which journal it's going to go to, is providing journals with much more information than they currently have in their decision making. And you know, currently we know a big problem in science is lots of editorial rejections because the matching between scientific work and journals is not being done as well as it could. So, you know, why review before journal submission? So Vivian Siegel, who you know, is editor of Cell, initiating editor of PLOS, two things, I'll just paraphrase. Scientists send papers in for publication before they're ready. I think this is actually really common, that we could do a better job really internally sending work out to journals in a way that will make them actually much more acceptable from the onset and less waste of everyone's time. The second point she makes is, I believe our best hope for fair, constructive decisions is to relieve reviewers of the responsibility to make recommendations for or against publication, and to maintain a separate and smaller pool of editors who can be dedicated to the journal to understand its standards. In other words, like remove the gatekeeping role of the reviewer, which is really the source of a lot of adversarial relationships within the reviewing system today. So, you know, the other thing is many of these pipelines are common in publishing platforms today. I think the reality of the world, though, where we live as a scientific community, is authors want choice. Scientists want choice of where they ultimately send the work. And this kind of system still would give authors a choice after evaluation where that work would eventually be published. So I'll briefly try to summarize some ideas of the benefits. Again, restoring peer review as a service to improve scientific work and separating it from a gatekeeping role, and allowing a flexible pipeline for authors to choose final publication venue, ultimately, hopefully making a better matchmaking with journals and faster acceptance, and hopefully, in many cases, a need to not re-review papers. And I think this whole thing actually could help the preprint effort overall by adding additional information to preprints and making preprints and perhaps more acceptable to the overall scientific community. And new roles for scientific societies, something that I'd like to talk about later. So what are the hurdles? Well, the biggest hurdles are always us. You know, if we make such a system, are we going to use it? I mean, this is a challenge that I put to us. You know, we have to take a step forward. If we believe in the values behind this, we have to take action. This is very similar to preprints. The other idea is the credibility. Scientists are a very keen barometer of scientific credibility. This system is only going to work if excellent scientists, funding agencies, scientific societies agree to participate. That's something that can move the scientific community along. Of course, you know, the big challenge here is that you have to create a peer review system that's going to be delivering excellence, because this is going to be an optional choice for authors. They're going to use it again and again if it provides outstanding value in improving their work. And this is a critical question. This has to be integrated with the journal system. So this is actually extending like an offering that of this as a partnership, really, to help us work together to do a better job for scientists and lead to more efficient publication. And the very last thing I'll just say in one word, community is really important for scientists. And I think one of the great things about the preprint effort is it somehow kind of galvanized the scientific community to do something good together. And I think that's been a very big part about the preprint movement. And I think that same spirit of creating community can be taken to the element of peer review as well. Because I think scientists want this, and I think this is also a very pragmatic also point to success of any program. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Hello. I would like to talk to you about tagging of published articles. And I should say that this is really, for us anyway, at the concept stage. I do not have any data, nor any concrete implementation plan, like, for example, the appraise or the peer feedback that Mike and Ron talked about. So this is really, and we heard yesterday also from Andrew Preston on tagging. So there are people in the room that know a lot more about how to do this and have experience with this. So we'd like to know from those experts and learn also from all of you whether you think tagging of published articles is actually something that we should really do going forward with in scientific publishing. Now, why do we think this is something that we think is important? What problem are we trying to solve? Hang on, how do I? Oh, here we go. The problem is that we need better indicators of scientific quality and impact. Now, we've already bashed the impact factor so many times. I don't think I need to go through that in detail again. Journal-based indicators dominate today, but we think they're simply not good enough because they evaluate scientists based on where they publish, not what they publish. So we think it's important that we move to article-specific indicators that really reflect much better the individual contributions of scientists. Now, we refer to these indicators as tags or badges. So in our paper, we refer to them as tags. In a comment, somebody said badges would be a better word. That may be, it may change, but I refer to them as tags because that's the term we use in our paper. So I want to start, first address why do we even need indicators of quality and impact? Now, the critiques of experts in the form of peer reviews before publication and after publication will, of course, always be the gold standard of scientific evaluations. And experts will probably not need indicators, quick indicators, to figure out what papers they want to read in their own field or how to evaluate scientists in their own field. So I don't think indicators are so important for them, for the experts. But I do think we all ultimately rely on them in two forms. When we select scholarly papers in areas outside our own expertise, and particularly when we evaluate scientists and applications at early stages of the application process, in the triage stage. I mean, I'm sure that institutions, when they hire faculty in the final round, when they go just through the last 10 applicants, no reputable institution would use indicators like the impact factor to make a decision, because you have few candidates to evaluate. There are many faculty who will be able to read all the papers. The problem is the early stages, the triage stages, where we are faced with reading hundreds of applications. I doubt that anybody can go through all the papers and read them. I think we all rely in that situation on some good indicators. And I think it's really important that we provide the best and the most genuine indicators to help in this kind of process. So that's where the post-publication tags come in. They are shorthand measures or proxies for a particular quality feature of published articles. And I think here are some critical features of these tags to make them effective. In some form, I think they need to be attached to the article, or at least they need to be easily discoverable with the article. I mean, I have no idea how that would be done, but I think that would be important to make them really useful. They have to be easily generated and easily consumed. If we want these tags to replace the impact factor is so easy. That's why it's so pervasive. Yeah? We need to have something that is also easily generated, that doesn't take too much time to create, and it needs to be easy to use. And also, they should be able to change over time to reflect how the impact of scientific work changes with time. So I listed a few example texts that we could think of. I will say here, these are just examples. I mean, the community and I could come up with probably much better examples. What would be worth capturing in a tag? But we could think of a tag that captures a technical quality score, could even initially start with technical quality scores that the peer reviewers provide, but then of course it could track later on comments from others. A reproducibility score. Imagine that scientists who were able or were not able to reproduce or build upon work that was described in a paper could easily just indicate through a tag whether they were able to reproduce or not this particular work. Finally, a citation score would be useful. Not necessarily absolute citation numbers, but relative citation numbers where corrected for the average citation number in a particular field. I think that would be a very useful thing. Imagine that would be just sitting next to the paper, and you could see whether it is more highly cited than average in that field or less highly cited. I think that would be telling you something very quickly about whether you would like to consume this, or whether you would like to read this paper. So here are some questions for the audience. Do you think tags would be a good and feasible alternative to journal-based indicators? Do you have any ideas for better approaches that allow scientists to quickly identify desired values of articles? There are some technological hurdles that maybe some of you have some ideas. How can these tags be created? I'd love to talk to Andrew. How can the tags be really attached to papers, or at least be discoverable with papers? And how can tags change over time? I mean, obviously, one of the biggest questions will be the cultural hurdle. Yeah, I think we refer to that a lot here. Will scientists really use even easy tags and replace the impact factor using these tags instead? I would also be curious about publishers. I worry a little bit that tags are somewhat subversive with journals, because journals care about their identity. And of course, if you tag papers in a journal, that would reveal that every journal, of course, publishes papers of highly varying quality. And so It shows that, despite all the good attempts of editors and not at their fault, journals publish always papers of varying articles, of varying quality and impact. And these tags would really highlight that fact. Yeah. So, thank you.
All right, so thanks to the incredible on-time performance of our speakers, we now have a luxurious over 20-minute break ahead of us before resuming the afternoon breakout sessions at 3:30. And again, I just want to remind everyone that we'll be observing the Chatham House rule for these breakout sessions, so please do not attribute the comments that you report back to any particular individual. But I also want to make an important announcement about departures tomorrow. If you are departing from HHMI tomorrow and you've not yet arranged transportation with conference services, please go to the desk out front and do so right now. By arranging this ahead of time, they can ensure that you will leave when you intend to. So thank you, and we'll see you at the breakout sessions in about 20 minutes. Again, the assignments are outside. So.